Winter, 1270. Central Bohemia. A forest spreads beneath a sky the color of wet stone. The trees are bare. Their branches reach upward like skeletal fingers, grasping at clouds that promise snow but deliver only cold. In the valley below, a group of men stand in a loose circle. They are stonemasons, laborers, craftsmen pulled from villages across the region. They wear heavy wool cloaks against the chill. Their breath forms white clouds that hang in the still air. They are not looking at each other. They are looking at the ground. At their feet, the earth has split open. A crack runs through limestone and sandstone, jagged and irregular, as if the ground itself had been torn apart by something beneath. The fissure is perhaps 2 meters wide at its broadest point, narrowing as it descends into darkness. One of the men, braver or more foolish than the others, picks up a stone. He leans over the edge and drops it into the crack. They wait. 10 seconds pass. 20. 30. No sound returns. No distant clatter of stone hitting bottom. No echo. Just silence. Deep and absolute. As if the crack swallows not just objects but sound itself. The man steps back from the edge. He makes the sign of the cross. The villagers who live nearby have a name for this place. They call it the gateway. Some call it the wound. The oldest among them, the ones who remember stories from their grandmothers, call it by a name that has no direct translation but means something close to the place where the world forgot to finish. They say the crack has always been here, longer than memory, longer than the oldest church, longer than any name given to the forest or the hills. They say that on certain nights sounds rise from the depths, whispers that form no words, scraping, as if something with claws is climbing toward the surface. And sometimes, very rarely, a scream, thin and distant, like a voice calling from the bottom of the sea. They say no amount of stones can fill it. Villagers once tried, generations ago, dumping cartload after cartload of rubble into the crack. The stones vanished into darkness. The crack remained unchanged. They say animals will not approach it. Horses refuse. Dogs whimper and pull at their leashes. Birds fly wide circles around the valley, as if the air above the crack carries a wrongness they can sense, but humans cannot. They say the crack appeared suddenly, centuries before, during a night of terrible storms. Lightning split the sky. The ground shook. And when morning came, the earth had opened, and something underneath had been exposed, or perhaps released. These are the stories. This is the folklore. This is what people believe when they do not have science, when they do not have explanations, when all they have is fear and the need to make sense of it. And now, in this winter of 1270, men have been ordered to build upon this cursed ground, not around it, not near it, upon it. They are to seal the crack, to cover it with stone, to construct a foundation over the opening, and then raise walls, and then build a castle that will stand as a permanent weight pressing down on whatever lies below. The orders came from the king. Przemysl Otakar Fauns, Secunus of Bohemia, a man who does not believe in curses, or at least does not admit to believing in them. A man who understands that power is demonstrated not just through conquest, but through the ability to impose order on the chaotic, the feared, the forbidden. If there is a wound in the earth, it will be sealed. If there is a gateway to darkness, it will be locked, and over it, a castle will rise. Not for defense, not for habitation, not for trade or governance or any purpose that makes conventional sense, but for one reason alone: to ensure that whatever is down there stays down there. The men in the circle do not speak their fears aloud. They are being paid. They have families. They will do the work. But as they begin gathering tools and materials, as they prepare to descend into the valley and lay the first stones over the crack. Each of them carries the same thought. Some doors were never meant to be opened. And some holes were never meant to be filled, only covered, only forgotten, only pressed beneath the weight of stone and mortar and prayer, and hoped, desperately hoped, that the weight will be enough. One of the younger laborers, a man named Václav, looks at the crack one last time before the work begins. He notices something the others have missed. The edges of the crack are smooth, not jagged, as if broken by force, but worn, polished, as if, over countless years, something has been moving through it, rubbing against the stone, shaping it, climbing. He does not mention this to the others. He simply picks up his tools and gets to work. Because sometimes the only way to survive fear is to bury it so deep that it becomes someone else's problem, someone in the future, someone who will stand on solid ground and never know what lies beneath their feet. This is how Houska Castle begins, not with glory, not with vision, but with fear, desperation, and the hope that stone can hold back whatever darkness waits below. Before we descend into these forgotten depths, if stories like this pull you into the past, let the algorithm know you're here. One click keeps you connected to history's mysteries. The year is 1253. Across Europe, power is shifting. The Holy Roman Empire is fracturing into competing territories. The Mongol invasions have left scars across the eastern regions. The Church wields authority that rivals kings, and faith is both weapon and shield. In this world of uncertainty, Bohemia, a kingdom at the crossroads of trade routes and cultural exchange, is ascending. Przemysl Otakar II. Sanit becomes king at the age of 22. He is intelligent, ambitious, and ruthless in the way that successful medieval rulers must be. His reign will be marked by territorial expansion, economic growth, and the construction of fortifications across his domain. He is a builder. Castles rise under his command, defensive structures positioned strategically to control trade routes, protect borders, and project power into contested regions. But Houska will be different. The site in question lies approximately 47 kilometers north of Prague, in the eastern section of the Kokogine forest. It is remote, heavily wooded, difficult to access. There are no major roads nearby, no rivers for transport, no towns of significance within a day's travel. It is, by every practical measure, the worst possible location for a castle. And yet, in the mid-13th century, surveyors are sent to examine the land. Reports are filed. Plans are drawn. And the king gives his approval. The official justification will be recorded in royal documents. Houska Castle is to serve as an administrative center for managing the king's expanding network of estates in northern Bohemia. A place where officials can meet, where records can be kept, where the infrastructure of governance can be maintained. This explanation satisfies the bureaucrats. It provides a legal and economic rationale for the expenditure of resources. But it does not explain why this particular location was chosen. Because the truth is simpler and stranger. Houska Castle is built where it is built because of the crack. The geological anomaly predates recorded history. Local oral tradition places it as far back as the 10th century, though some stories suggest it has existed much longer. The crack is a natural fissure in the limestone and sandstone bedrock. It is approximately 2 meters wide at the surface and descends at a steep angle into the earth. The depth has never been measured. Early attempts to sound the bottom using weighted ropes failed. Either the crack is deeper than the available rope, or the passage descends into branching caverns where the weight becomes lodged. Geologically, such formations are not uncommon in limestone regions. Water erosion over millennia can create extensive cave systems, sinkholes, and vertical shafts. The Bohemian landscape is riddled with such features. But this crack is different. It releases gas, not constantly, but periodically. plumes of foul-smelling vapor that rise from the depths, particularly during warm weather when pressure changes underground. The gas carries an odor of sulfur and decay, and those who inhale it report dizziness, nausea, and vivid hallucinations. It produces sound. Villagers living within a few kilometers describe hearing noises emanating from the crack during certain conditions, usually at night, usually during storms. The sounds are difficult to describe. Scraping, groaning, something that might be wind moving through irregular stone passages, or might be something else. And it has a reputation. For generations, the people living in the surrounding villages have avoided the area. They do not hunt near the crack. They do not gather wood from the trees closest to it. They do not let their children play in the valley. They tell stories to explain their fear. The crack is a doorway to the underworld. Demons emerge from it at night. Souls of the damned claw their way toward the surface. The devil himself dug the crack as a passage between hell and earth. These are folk beliefs, shaped by centuries of Christian theology layered over older pagan traditions. They reflect a pre-scientific attempt to understand a natural phenomenon that seems unnatural. But they are also effective. The stories keep people away. And in keeping people away, the crack remains undisturbed, until the king decides otherwise. Otakar II is aware of the legends. His advisors inform him of the local superstitions. But he is also a pragmatist. He understands that fear, left unchecked, becomes a form of power that operates outside royal control. A crack in the earth that inspires terror is a crack that diminishes the king's authority. It suggests that there are forces in his kingdom beyond his reach, places where his law does not extend. This cannot be tolerated. And so the decision is made. The crack will be sealed. Not filled. Filling has been attempted and failed, but sealed, covered, built over. And to ensure the seal holds, a structure will be raised above it, a permanent physical manifestation of royal authority imposing order on chaos. The decision is political as much as practical. It sends a message. There is no place in Bohemia where the king's will does not reach, not even the places people call cursed. Construction plans are drafted, a team of architects and engineers is assembled. The best stonemasons in the kingdom are contracted. Materials are sourced. Limestone from regional quarries, timber from the surrounding forest, iron fittings from Prague's forges. And in 1270, 17 years after Otakar takes the throne, the work begins. The first task is the most crucial, sealing the crack. Workers descend into the valley carrying massive stone slabs. Each slab weighs several hundred kilograms and requires multiple men to maneuver into position. The slabs are cut to fit the irregular shape of the crack's opening, with edges overlapping to create a continuous surface. The work is slow. The ground around the crack is unstable. Men refuse to work alone. They insist on working in pairs or groups, and even then they tie ropes around their waists. Safety lines held by colleagues just in case. Just in case what? No one says explicitly, but everyone understands. As the slabs are positioned, mortar is applied. Thick layers of lime mortar, mixed with sand and crushed stone, fill every gap. The goal is not just to cover the crack, but to create an impermeable seal, something that will endure for centuries. Once the slabs are in place, a foundation is poured. Stone and mortar are built up layer by layer, creating a platform several meters thick. This foundation becomes the floor of what will eventually be the castle's chapel. The choice to build a chapel directly over the crack is deliberate. It is a religious act, a sanctification of cursed ground. The logic is medieval but clear. If evil rises from below, holiness from above will push it back down. Construction continues. Walls rise around the sealed crack. But these are not ordinary defensive walls. They are built inward. In typical castle construction, the strongest fortifications face outward toward potential attackers. Towers provide elevated positions for archers. Walls are angled to deflect projectiles. Gates are reinforced with iron and designed to withstand battering rams. Houska has none of this. Its walls, particularly in the sections closest to the chapel, are oriented inward. The arrow slits, narrow openings through which defenders could fire, point toward the courtyard, toward the interior of the castle itself. This makes no defensive sense. An enemy approaching from outside would face minimal resistance, but an enemy emerging from inside, from below, would face walls designed to contain, to trap, to prevent escape. The architecture tells a story. It reveals what the builders feared. They did not fear invasion from the forest. They feared eruption from below. The construction of Houska Castle requires 10 years. This is an unusually long timeline for a structure of its size. Comparable castles built during the same period, defensive fortresses with strategic value, were typically completed in 4 to 6 years. Houska, despite being smaller and less complex than many of these, takes nearly twice as long. The extended timeline reflects the difficulty of the project. The site itself presents challenges. The ground is uneven. The forest encroaches on all sides, requiring constant clearing. Access routes for transporting materials are primitive, little more than widened footpaths through dense woodland. But the true challenge is psychological. The workforce fluctuates throughout the construction period. Records are incomplete, but estimates suggest that approximately 240 workers are employed at peak times. This includes stonemasons, carpenters, laborers, carters, blacksmiths, and eventually artists brought in to decorate the interior. Turnover is high. Men arrive, work for weeks or months, and then leave. Some cite family obligations. Others simply disappear without explanation. Foremen report difficulty maintaining consistent crews, particularly for work related to the foundation and chapel. The laborers speak among themselves. Stories circulate through the camps. Tools go missing. Hammers, chisels, measuring ropes. Items that were present at the end of one shift are gone by the start of the next. They turn up later in strange places, inside sealed walls, at the bottom of mortar buckets, hidden beneath foundation stones. Some workers report hearing voices. Not words exactly, but sounds that resemble human speech. Murmurs that seem to come from below the ground, from the sealed crack, even though logic says nothing should be audible through meters of stone and mortar. Others describe dreams, vivid nightmares that recur night after night, dreams of descending into darkness, of hands reaching up from below, of standing at the edge of the crack and feeling an overwhelming compulsion to jump. These are subjective accounts, impossible to verify, but their persistence suggests something. Whether that something is psychological, the effect of working on a site laden with superstition, or environmental. Perhaps the lingering effects of gas exposure remains unclear. What is clear is that the men are afraid. They develop rituals. Before beginning work each day, they make the sign of the cross. They carry religious medallions. They avoid working near the chapel after dark. When forced to enter the chapel area at night, they work in groups, never alone, and they light as many torches as possible. The foreman, a man named Radek, keeps a log. It is a practical document, recording materials used, work completed, wages paid. But occasionally, personal observations slip through. On one page, dated to what would be approximately March 1274, he writes, "Men refuse to work in the chapel today, claim the floor is warm. I checked. It is cold as always, but they will not be convinced." On another page, several months later, "Lost another crew this week. 6 men. Left in the night. No explanation. No wages collected. Their tools remain." And later still, "Brought in priest to bless the site, Men seem calmer. Work proceeds. The blessing becomes a regular practice. A local priest is contracted to visit the construction site weekly. He performs blessings, sprinkles holy water, leads prayers. The workers seem reassured by this. Productivity improves. But Roddick's log also notes, priest refuses to enter chapel alone, insists on companion. I asked why, he did not answer. By 1275, the basic structure is complete. The foundation is sealed. The walls are raised. The roof is in place. The castle from the outside looks finished. But the interior work, the detailed stone carving, the installation of wooden fixtures, the painting of frescoes, will take another 5 years. This is when the artists arrive. Frescoes in medieval architecture serve multiple purposes. They are decorative, certainly, but they are also didactic. They tell stories. They communicate religious teachings to populations that are largely illiterate. They transform blank walls into narrative spaces. The frescoes commissioned for Houska's chapel are unusual. Typically, chapel art depicts biblical scenes in a specific way: Christ triumphant, saints in glory, angels ascending. The focus is on victory, salvation, the promise of heaven. Houska's frescoes are different. They depict struggle, combat, eternal conflict. The central fresco shows the archangel Michael. He is armored, wings spread, sword raised. Before him, a dragon writhes, scaled, clawed, mouth open in a roar. Michael's blade is positioned to strike, but the dragon is not defeated. It is actively fighting back, tail lashing, claws extended. This is not a depiction of victory. It is a depiction of ongoing battle. Imagine walking these halls in 1278, when every wall was freshly painted and every stone gleamed. What would you see first? Drop a word in the comments: chapel, courtyard, or walls. Another fresco shows Michael weighing souls. This is a common medieval image, the psychostasia, the weighing of souls on Judgment Day. On one side of the scale, souls destined for heaven. On the other, souls destined for hell. But in Houska's version, the scales are not tipped definitively. They hover in balance, suggesting that judgment is not yet complete, that the fate of these souls remains uncertain. And then there is the strangest fresco of all, a centaur, half human, half horse. But the human half is female, and she is left-handed. Both unusual details in medieval iconography. She draws a bow, aiming toward the viewer, or perhaps toward something beyond the viewer's line of sight. Scholars have debated this image for centuries. Some suggest it represents pagan forces that Christianity sought to suppress. Others argue it depicts a guardian figure, protecting the chapel from external threats. But there is another interpretation, whispered more than published. The centaur is aiming downward, toward the floor, toward the sealed crack, as if what needs to be guarded against is not outside the castle, but below it. The artists who paint these frescoes spend months inside the chapel. They work by candlelight, applying pigments layer by layer to damp plaster, the fresco technique that allows colors to bond permanently with the wall. One of the artists, a master painter brought from Prague, leaves behind a brief note in the margin of a contract document. The note is in Latin, hastily scrawled. Translated, it reads, "This place does not want us here." No further explanation is given. The painter completes his work and departs. There is no record of him returning to Houska. By 1280, the castle is officially complete. The chapel is consecrated. The walls are fully raised. The interior chambers are furnished, though sparsely. And then, for 6 months, nothing happens. The castle stands empty. No officials arrive to take up administrative duties. No soldiers are stationed there. No household staff is employed. The structure sits silent in the forest, its red roof visible through the trees, its walls intact. its purpose unclear. Locals watch from a distance and wonder, why build a castle and leave it vacant? The answer, never stated officially, is that no one wants to be the first to occupy it. No one wants to sleep in chambers built over cursed ground. No one wants to walk halls where the walls face inward and the arrow slits point the wrong way. Eventually, in late 1280 or early 1281, a small crew of caretakers is installed. They are not soldiers or administrators. They are maintenance staff, men paid to ensure the structure does not fall into disrepair, to light fires in the hearths, to inspect the chapel daily and confirm that the seals remain intact. They live in the upper chambers, as far from the chapel as possible, and every morning one of them descends to the ground floor, walks to the chapel, opens the door, and checks the stone slabs covering the crack. They are looking for cracks in the seal, for gaps in the mortar, for any sign that something below is pushing upward. This becomes the routine. This is what Houska Castle is for. Not governance, not defense, not habitation, surveillance. They spent 15 years building this fortress. If you had that wealth and time, what would you create? Let me know below. To understand why Houska Castle is architecturally abnormal, it is necessary to understand what a typical 13th century castle looks like. Medieval castles serve specific functions. They are defensive structures, designed to protect against sieges. They are administrative centers, housing the nobility and their retinues. They are symbols of power, visible assertions of authority over the surrounding territory. Their architecture reflects these purposes. A standard castle of the period is built on elevated ground, a hilltop, a ridge, a strategic overlook. Elevation provides defensive advantage. It allows defenders to see approaching enemies. It forces attackers to climb, exhausting them before they reach the walls. Houska sits in a shallow valley. A standard castle has a water source within its walls, a well, a cistern, access to a spring or underground stream. Water is essential. Without it, a besieged castle cannot hold out for more than days. Houska has no well, no cistern, no internal water source. A standard castle has kitchens, storerooms, granaries. A garrison needs food. A noble household requires facilities for preparing meals, storing provisions, managing supplies. Houska has none of these. There are chambers that could theoretically serve as kitchens, but they lack the necessary infrastructure. No large hearths, no storage cellars, no evidence of cooking facilities in the original construction. A standard castle has defenses oriented outward. Walls are thick on the exterior, thinner on the interior. Towers provide elevated positions from which archers can fire on attackers. Gates are reinforced and positioned to create bottlenecks, where enemies can be trapped and slaughtered. Houska's defenses are oriented inward. The walls are thickest around the chapel and the central courtyard. In some sections, the stone measures over 3 meters in thickness, far beyond what would be necessary to repel medieval siege weapons. But 3 meters of stone is not just defensive. It is containment. It is insurance against something breaching from the inside. The arrow slits, narrow vertical openings in the walls, are positioned strangely. In a normal castle, they face outward, allowing defenders to fire arrows at attackers while remaining protected behind the wall. In Houska, many of the arrow slits face inward. They point toward the courtyard, toward the chapel, toward the interior of the castle itself. This makes no tactical sense. An enemy army approaching from the forest would face walls with minimal firing positions, but something emerging from the chapel, something trying to reach the outer walls and escape into the forest, would be met with a barrage of arrows from multiple angles. The architecture is defensive, but it is defending against the wrong direction, unless the direction is correct, and the threat was never external. Houska's dimensions are compact. The main structure measures approximately 60 meters in length and 40 meters in width at its broadest point. This is small compared to other royal castles of the period. Prague Castle, for example, is more than 10 times larger. The compact size is deliberate. A smaller structure requires fewer defenders, less maintenance, and less resources to sustain. It also means that every part of the castle is within close proximity to the chapel. If the chapel is the seal, then the entire castle is built to ensure nothing disturbs that seal. The layout is organized vertically. 3 stories rise above the foundation. The ground floor contains the chapel and several small chambers, storage rooms perhaps, though their original function is unclear. The second floor houses larger rooms, including what would later become the Green Chamber and the Knight's Drawing Room. The third floor contains smaller chambers, likely intended as sleeping quarters for caretakers or guards. But there is no grand hall, no throne room, no space designed for hosting banquets or receiving dignitaries. The interior arrangement is utilitarian, almost monastic. This is not a castle built for living. It is a castle built for watching. The roof is steeply pitched, covered with red clay tiles. This is a common design in the region, effective at shedding rain and snow. The steep pitch also creates a dramatic silhouette, visible from the surrounding forest, a landmark that signals occupation and authority. But the roof serves another function. In medieval belief, evil could not easily pass through blessed space. By placing a roof over the chapel, by creating a covered, enclosed space, the builders were adding another layer of spiritual protection. The chapel itself was not just sealed from below, it was enclosed from above. The windows throughout the castle are narrow. This is partly defensive. Narrow windows are harder for attackers to shoot through, but it also creates an interior atmosphere that is dim, cold, and enclosed. Even on bright days, the interior of Houska holds shadows. The narrow windows allow only thin shafts of sunlight. The stone walls absorb what little warmth penetrates. The overall effect is claustrophobic, a sense of being entombed. This is not accidental. The architecture is designed to feel heavy, oppressive, permanent. It is meant to convey that what lies beneath is held down by weight that cannot be moved. There are no decorative elements on the exterior, no carvings, no sculptures, no heraldic symbols. The outer walls are plain stone, unadorned. This is unusual for a royal commission. Typically, kings want their castles to display wealth and artistry, to impress visitors and intimidate enemies. Houska's exterior is blunt, functional. It does not advertise grandeur. It advertises seriousness. The message is clear. This is not a place for celebration. This is a place for purpose. The courtyard is small, barely large enough for a dozen men to stand comfortably. It is enclosed on all sides by walls, creating a sense of confinement. There is no grand entrance, no sweeping approach. Visitors enter through a modest gate and find themselves immediately in a tight, enclosed space. The courtyard's ground is paved with stone. This is practical. It prevents mud, but it also ensures that nothing can be dug up from below. The stone paving is continuous, unbroken, another layer of sealing. Every design choice reinforces the same principle: containment. The castle is not built to welcome. It is built to hold, and what it holds is beneath the chapel floor, under meters of stone and mortar, behind walls that face inward and windows that let in only reluctant light. What it holds is a question that has no answer, only a crack in the earth, covered by slabs, sealed by prayer, and pressed down by the weight of a castle that should never have been built. The walls were built 12 feet thick in places. Fire? Intruders? Or something else? Comment what you think they were protecting against. At the heart of Houska Castle, occupying the ground floor directly above the sealed fissure, stands the chapel of the Archangel Michael. It is a two-story structure within the larger castle, a vertical space that rises through both the ground and first floors, creating a vaulted ceiling that draws the eye upward. But the symbolism is inverted. In traditional Christian architecture, chapels are designed to elevate the spirit. The altar is raised. The ceiling soars. Frescoes depict ascension. Christ rising, angels lifting souls toward heaven, saints climbing toward salvation. The vertical orientation is meant to remind the faithful that holiness is above, that heaven is reached by climbing, by striving upward. Houska's chapel follows the same vertical structure, but its focus is downward. The floor is the most important element. It is composed of massive stone slabs, each one fitted precisely to its neighbors, with mortar filling every gap. These are not decorative tiles. They are structural elements, load-bearing stones chosen for their weight and durability. Beneath these slabs lies the original crack in the earth. Beneath the crack, according to legend, according to fear, according to centuries of folklore, lies something that must never be reached. The slabs are the first seal. The mortar is the second. The chapel built on top is the third. And the dedication to Archangel Michael is the fourth. Michael is not an arbitrary choice. In Christian theology, Michael is the warrior angel, the commander of heaven's armies. He is the one who cast Lucifer out of paradise. He is the guardian against evil, the defender of souls, the angel who stands at the boundary between the divine and the demonic. To dedicate a chapel to Michael is to invoke protection. It is to call upon the highest martial authority in the celestial hierarchy and ask him to stand guard. The dedication is not decorative, it is functional. The interior of the chapel is somber. The stone walls are left mostly bare, with only the frescoes providing color. The floor is unadorned, just the heavy slabs, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. There are no pews, no seating of any kind in the original construction. This is not a space designed for congregation. It is designed for ritual, for observation, for the maintenance of the seal. The altar is positioned at the far end of the chapel, opposite the entrance. It is a simple stone structure, carved from a single block. On the wall behind the altar, a fresco depicts Michael in full battle stance, wings spread, sword raised, eyes fixed on the dragon at his feet. This image dominates the space. It is the first thing seen upon entering the chapel. It is the visual anchor around which everything else is organized. And it is unambiguous in its message. There is a battle happening here. Not a battle that was won in the past, but a battle that is ongoing, eternal, never concluded. The vaulted ceiling rises approximately 10 meters above the floor. Gothic arches span the width of the chapel, their pointed peaks emphasizing height. The arches are functional. They distribute the weight of the roof and upper floors, but they also create an acoustic effect. Sounds echo in the chapel. Footsteps reverberate. Voices carry and overlap, creating a disorienting effect where it becomes difficult to tell where a sound originated. This acoustic quality is noted by many visitors. Some find it eerie. Others suggest it is intentional, a design feature meant to amplify prayers, to ensure that holy words fill the space and leave no room for silence. Or perhaps the opposite, to mask other sounds, to cover whatever might rise from below. The windows are narrow and positioned high on the walls. Light enters at steep angles, creating shafts that illuminate specific areas while leaving others in shadow. The overall effect is chiaroscuro, a stark contrast between light and dark. Even at midday, the chapel never feels fully illuminated. There are always corners that remain in darkness, always shadows that seem deeper than they should be. This is not poor design. This is deliberate. The interplay of light and shadow reinforces the chapel's purpose. It is a space of liminality, a threshold between the sacred above and the unknown below. The air in the chapel is noticeably colder than in the rest of the castle. Visitors remark on this consistently. The temperature difference is measurable, several degrees colder than the surrounding rooms, even in summer. There are practical explanations. The chapel is on the ground floor where stone retains cold. The thick walls and narrow windows prevent heat from entering. The vaulted ceiling creates air circulation patterns that draw warm air upward and out. But the cold is also psychological. It is associated with the pit below. Whether the association is justified or not, it persists. The chapel feels cold because people expect it to feel cold, because cold is associated with depth, with caverns, with the underworld. The frescoes on the walls are the chapel's most distinctive feature. They date to the early 1400s. Painted more than a century after the castle's construction, this suggests that the original walls were left bare, and only later were the images added, perhaps as the legends around the castle grew, and the need for visual reinforcement of the chapel's protective purpose became more urgent. The frescoes are faded now. Centuries of exposure to moisture and temperature fluctuations have taken their toll, but enough remains to discern the imagery. Michael fighting the dragon, Michael weighing souls, the strange left-handed female centaur, and scattered throughout, smaller figures, demons with animal features, half-human creatures, twisted forms that seem to emerge from cracks in the painted walls. These are not typical religious images. They are closer to marginalia, the strange, unsettling figures that medieval artists would draw in the margins of manuscripts, images that hinted at chaos and disorder lurking at the edges of the ordered world. But here, they are not in the margins. They are integrated into the sacred space, as if to acknowledge that the boundary between order and chaos, between the holy and the profane, is thinner here than elsewhere. The artists who painted these frescoes understood something. They understood that this chapel was not like other chapels. It was not just a place of worship. It was a battleground, and the images they created reflect that understanding. Over the centuries, the chapel has been maintained with obsessive care. The floor is inspected regularly. Any cracks in the mortar are repaired immediately. The slabs are checked for signs of movement or stress. This maintenance is not casual. It is systematic, ritualized, treated as a responsibility that cannot be neglected. Because the chapel is not just architecture. It is a mechanism, a seal, a lock. And like any lock, it requires constant vigilance to ensure it continues to function. The chapel's purpose is singular: to keep what is below from reaching above. And for over 700 years, it has succeeded, or at least it has not yet failed. The frescoes inside the chapel of the Archangel Michael are not merely decorative. They are narrative, didactic, and, if the interpretations of countless scholars, priests, and visitors are to be believed, prophetic. The earliest surviving frescoes date to approximately 1410, though there is evidence suggesting earlier paintings may have existed and been painted over. Medieval frescoes were often layered, new images applied over old, as theological fashions changed or as previous work deteriorated. The technique used is true fresco, pigments applied to wet plaster, allowing the colors to bond chemically with the wall. This creates images that are remarkably durable, but also impossible to remove without destroying the wall itself. The choice to use true fresco is significant. It means the images are permanent. They cannot be altered or erased without structural damage. They are as much a part of the chapel as the stone itself. The central fresco, positioned directly behind the altar, depicts the Archangel Michael in combat with a dragon. Michael is shown in full armor, plate mail rendered in silver and gold pigments, now faded to gray and ochre. His wings are massive, spanning the width of the fresco, each feather delineated with precise brush strokes. In his right hand, he wields a sword, raised high, blade angled downward toward the dragon's neck. The dragon is not small. It is nearly as large as Michael himself, coiled and serpentine, scaled in shades of green and black. Its mouth is open, revealing rows of teeth. Its eyes are red, rendered with a pigment that has retained its color better than most, creating an unsettling focal point. The dragon's claws are extended, reaching toward Michael. Its tail lashes to the side as if in mid-motion. This is not a depiction of Michael victorious. The sword has not yet struck. The dragon is not defeated. The image captures a moment of confrontation, a battle in progress, outcome uncertain. This is unusual. Most medieval depictions of Michael show the dragon already subdued, already pierced by the sword, already cast down. The message is clear: good has triumphed, evil is defeated. The faithful need not fear. Houska's fresco offers no such reassurance. The battle is ongoing. Michael fights, but the dragon resists. The symbolism is clear to anyone familiar with medieval theology. The struggle between good and evil is not concluded. It is eternal, perpetual, requiring constant vigilance. And the location of this fresco, directly above the sealed pit, suggests a more specific interpretation. Michael is not fighting a metaphorical dragon. He is fighting what lies below this chapel, and the fight is not over. A second major fresco occupies the opposite wall. It depicts the psychostasia, the weighing of souls. Michael stands at the center, holding a balance scale. On one side of the scale, small human figures represent the righteous. On the other side, similar figures represent the damned. In traditional depictions of this scene, the scale is clearly tipped. The righteous are lifted, the damned are lowered. Judgment is decisive. In Houska's version, the scale is level, perfectly balanced. The two sides hover at equal height, suggesting that judgment is not yet rendered, that the fate of these souls remains uncertain. This ambiguity is deliberate. It reflects a theological anxiety. Salvation is not guaranteed. The boundary between the saved and the damned is thin, and any soul can tip from one side to the other. But there is another interpretation, whispered more than stated. The balance suggests that the forces of good and evil are evenly matched. Neither dominates. The struggle is perpetual. And if the struggle is perpetual, then the seal below must be maintained perpetually. The third major fresco is the strangest. It depicts a centaur, half human, half horse. The human torso is female, bare-breasted in the classical style. Her hair is long, flowing over her shoulders. In her hands, she holds a bow, drawn and aimed. But she is left-handed. In medieval iconography, left-handedness is associated with the sinister, the unnatural, the demonic. The Latin word for left is sinister, and this association carries through into visual culture. A left-handed figure is marked as other, as outside the normal order. The centaur's arrow is aimed downward, not toward an enemy in the distance, but toward the ground, toward the floor of the chapel. Scholars have debated this image for decades. Some suggest the centaur represents a pagan guardian, a pre-Christian figure incorporated into Christian iconography as a symbol of the old god's role in protecting sacred boundaries. Others argue the centaur is a demon, a hybrid creature, part human, part beast, representing the corruption that occurs when boundaries are crossed and categories are mixed. But there is a third interpretation, less published but persistent among locals and guides. The centaur is aiming at something below the floor. She is not a threat. She is a defender. Her arrow is poised to strike at whatever might emerge from the pit, and her left-handedness marks her as liminal, neither fully good nor fully evil, but something in between, something capable of fighting on the boundary where angels fear to tread. Scattered throughout the chapel, in smaller frescoes and painted details, are additional figures, demons with animal heads, creatures that are part human, part reptile, part insect, faces twisted in expressions of agony or rage, hands reaching up from the edges of painted scenes, as if trying to pull themselves into the frame. These images are disturbing. They do not belong in a sacred space. They violate the decorum typically expected in chapel art, but they are there, integrated into the walls, permanent. Their presence suggests that the artists who created these frescoes were not interested in comforting the faithful. They were interested in warning them. These are not decorative flourishes. They are documentation, a record of what the artists believed or knew about this place. The frescoes took 15 years to complete. This is an extraordinarily long time for a project of this scale. Chapel frescoes of comparable size were often completed in 1 or 2 years. The extended timeline suggests either extraordinary attention to detail or frequent interruptions. Perhaps both. The artists worked in stages. Sections of wall were prepared, plastered, and painted, then left to dry before the next section was begun. This process allowed for revisions, for consultations, for changes in design as the work progressed. But it also meant that the artists spent 15 years inside this chapel, 15 years breathing the cold air, 15 years working by candlelight in a space where sounds echoed strangely, 15 years standing on the floor that covered the pit. Did they hear things? Did they see things? We have only fragments. A note in a contract, hastily scrawled, "This place does not want us here." Another reference, found in a letter from one artist to a colleague, "I dream of falling. Every night, I dream of falling into darkness, and I wake before I reach the bottom." These are subjective accounts. They prove nothing, but they add to the cumulative weight of testimony. Centuries of people reporting that something about Houska feels wrong. The frescoes themselves can be read as testimony. They are not generic religious images. They are specific, peculiar, unsettling. They depict a world where the battle is not won, where judgment is not final, where the boundaries between categories are permeable and dangerous. They depict, in other words, a world where the pit beneath the chapel is not safely sealed, but only temporarily contained. And containment, unlike victory, requires constant effort. The frescoes are that effort. They are visual prayers painted onto walls, designed to reinforce the spiritual seal that complements the physical seal of stone and mortar. Every figure of Michael is a reminder. You are guarding this place. Every demon in the margins is a reminder. This is what you are guarding against. Every ambiguous symbol is a reminder. Do not assume the battle is over. The chapel's art is not meant to inspire. It is meant to warn. And for over 6 centuries, the warning has been heeded. The floor remains intact. The frescoes remain in place. The seal holds. But the images on the walls suggest a question that no one wants to ask aloud. For how long? When Houska Castle was commissioned by King Przemysl Otakar II, official documents provided a clear justification. The structure would serve as an administrative center for managing royal estates in northern Bohemia. This explanation satisfied the bureaucrats who allocated funds. It provided a legal rationale for the expenditure of resources. It placed the project within the framework of governance and territorial management that defined medieval royal authority. But the explanation has always been inadequate. Administrative centers require certain features. They need to be accessible, positioned near roads or navigable rivers, close to population centers, easy to reach for officials traveling from regional towns. Houska is 47 kilometers north of Prague, deep in the Kokogine forest. There are no major roads leading to it. No river provides transport access. The nearest town of any significance is several hours' travel on foot, or horseback through dense woodland. For an official traveling from Prague to conduct administrative business, Houska is inconveniently remote. Easier to meet in Prague itself, or in one of the larger towns with established infrastructure. Administrative centers also require practical facilities, meeting halls where officials can gather, record rooms for storing documents, kitchens to feed staff, wells to provide water, stables for horses. Houska has none of these, at least not in its original construction. There are rooms that could theoretically be adapted for such purposes, but the initial design does not include them. Most tellingly, administrative centers require people: clerks, scribes, messengers, guards, servants. A functioning estate office would employ dozens of individuals, all of whom need housing, food, and supervision. There is no evidence that Houska ever housed such a workforce. The castle's size and layout simply cannot accommodate the number of people necessary for genuine administrative function. So if Houska was not built to serve as an administrative center, why does the official record claim otherwise? The answer lies in the politics of justification. Medieval kings did not have unlimited budgets. They relied on tax revenues, feudal obligations, and loans from merchants and nobility. Every major expenditure required explanation. Funds allocated for one purpose could not easily be diverted to another without raising questions. To build a castle for no apparent reason, or worse, to admit that the castle was being built because of local superstitions about a cursed pit, would invite ridicule and opposition. But to build a castle for administrative purposes, that was conventional. Understood. A normal expression of royal authority. The administrative justification was, in essence, a cover story. It allowed the project to proceed without drawing undue scrutiny. But it also created a problem. If Houska was officially an administrative center, then it should function as one. Officials should be stationed there. Business should be conducted. The castle should demonstrate its utility. This never happens. After the castle's completion in 1280, there is no record of it being used for estate management. No records of meetings held there. No correspondence sent from Houska regarding administrative matters. No ledgers or tax documents produced at the site. The castle stands empty for months after completion, and when it is finally occupied, it is not by administrators but by caretakers, men whose job is simply to maintain the structure and ensure the chapel remains intact. This raises an obvious question. Why was the castle not used for its stated purpose? The most straightforward answer is that the stated purpose was never the real purpose. The real purpose, known to the king, his advisors, and the local population, was to seal the crack, to cover the pit, to ensure that whatever lay beneath was kept beneath. But this purpose could not be stated in official documents. It was too irrational, too rooted in folklore, too vulnerable to accusations of superstition. So the administrative justification was maintained in writing, even as everyone involved understood it was a fiction. This duality, official explanation versus actual purpose, defines Houska from its inception. It is a castle that exists in two registers, the public and the private, the recorded and the whispered. In public records, it is an administrative center. In private understanding, it is a seal, and the seal is what matters. Over the decades and centuries that follow, various noble families inherit Houska. They maintain it, repair it, ensure it does not fall into ruin. But they do not use it. Or rather, they do not use it for anything except its true purpose, keeping the pit covered. This is expensive. Maintaining a castle requires constant investment. Roofs must be replaced, walls must be repointed, foundations must be inspected and reinforced. All of this costs money. And the families who own Houska continue to spend that money generation after generation, even though the castle generates no income and serves no practical function. Why? Because they understand, whether through family tradition, local knowledge, or first-hand experience, that the castle must not be abandoned. The seal must be maintained. The chapel floor must remain intact. This is the hidden economy of Houska. It is not an investment that pays returns. It is an expenditure that prevents disaster. And disaster, by its nature, is difficult to quantify. How do you measure the value of something that has not happened? How do you justify the cost of preventing an event that, if the seal works, will never occur? This is the paradox of containment. If it succeeds, it appears unnecessary. If it fails, it is too late. So the families err on the side of caution. They pay for maintenance. They hire caretakers. They ensure that someone is always watching. And when travelers ask, why maintain a castle that serves no purpose? The answer given is always the same. It is part of our heritage, a historical treasure, a monument to Bohemian craftsmanship, all of which is true, but also incomplete. The fuller answer, the one not spoken aloud, is simpler. Because we must. They spent decades maintaining this fortress in the middle of nowhere. If you had that responsibility, would you take it seriously? Let me know below. In the winter of 1281, Houska Castle receives its first permanent occupants. They are not the officials, scribes, and administrators suggested by the castle's supposed purpose. They are not soldiers stationed to defend a strategic position. They are not nobility seeking a country retreat. They are caretakers, maintenance workers, men hired to live in the castle and ensure it does not fall into disrepair. There are 12 of them, according to fragmentary records. Their names are not recorded. Their backgrounds are unknown. They are, in the historical record, anonymous functionaries, people whose labor is essential but unremarkable. They are paid modest wages from a fund established by the crown. The payments are regular but not generous, enough to live on, but not enough to attract ambitious men seeking wealth. This is deliberate. The work requires a specific temperament, reliability over ambition, caution over curiosity, routine over initiative. The caretaker's duties are clearly defined. Each morning, one of them descends to the chapel. He opens the door, heavy, iron-bound, installed to prevent unauthorized access, and enters the cold, echoing space. He walks to the center of the chapel, where the floor is flattest, where the stone slabs fit most precisely. He kneels. He inspects the slabs. He looks for cracks in the stone. He checks the mortar between the slabs for signs of crumbling or displacement. He runs his fingers along the gaps, feeling for drafts, for moisture, for warmth. If everything is intact, as it almost always is, he stands, makes the sign of the cross, and leaves the chapel. The door is locked behind him. This inspection occurs every day without fail. If the designated caretaker is ill, another takes his place. The routine is not broken for weather, for holidays, for personal inconvenience. It is the castle's primary function. Everything else, maintaining the roof, clearing snow from the courtyard, repairing stonework, is secondary. The chapel must be inspected. The seal must be confirmed every single day. The caretakers live in the upper chambers, as far from the chapel as the castle's compact size allows. They share rooms, sleeping in shifts, so that the castle is never entirely unoccupied. Fires are kept burning in the hearths throughout the night. This serves the practical purpose of warmth, but it also serves a psychological purpose. Light and heat are associated with habitation, with life, with human presence. The caretakers are not soldiers, but they carry weapons. Not swords or spears. Those would be impractical for men engaged in manual labor. But knives, axes, tools that serve double duty. Who are they expecting to defend against? The question is never answered explicitly, But the weapons are carried, and the fires are kept lit, and the men sleep in shifts. And every night, whoever is awake walks the halls. A patrol route is established through the second-floor chambers, down the main staircase, around the courtyard, back up to the third floor. The patrol does not include the chapel. The chapel is locked at night and no one enters until morning. The caretakers speak little about their work. This is partly temperament. They are not hired for eloquence, but partly necessity. What would they say? That they live in a castle built over a pit that local legend claims is a gateway to hell? That their job is to check every day whether the seal over this pit remains intact? That they lie awake at night listening to the wind move through the narrow windows and wondering whether the sounds are only wind? There is nothing to be gained by speaking of such things, so they do not speak. They work, they inspect, they maintain, they endure. For 30 years, this is the pattern of life at Houska Castle. Caretakers come and go. Some stay for years. Others leave after months. Turnover is expected. The work is isolating, tedious, and unsettling. But the routine continues, and the seal holds. During this period, Houska begins to develop a reputation. Travelers passing through the region hear stories. Locals share folklore. The castle built over the gateway to hell. The fortress where the walls face inward. The place where no one wants to live. These stories spread. They become part of the regional mythology, told and retold, embellished with each telling. And as the stories spread, Houska becomes something more than a structure. It becomes a symbol. Of what exactly varies depending on who is telling the story. To some, it is a symbol of the church's power, Christianity imposing order on pagan chaos, holy architecture sealing demonic influence. To others, it is a symbol of futility, human effort attempting to contain forces that cannot be contained, a castle that will inevitably fail because what lies beneath is too strong. And to a few, it is a symbol of something darker, that humanity has always known there are places where the world is thin, where the boundary between what is and what should not be grows dangerously permeable, and that our only response is to cover such places and hope the covering holds. In 1310, ownership of Houska passes from the crown to the Burka of Dubois family, one of the most powerful noble houses in Bohemia. The Burkas do not occupy the castle. They have more comfortable estates elsewhere, but they recognize the importance of maintaining the structure. They increase the caretaker's wages slightly. They fund repairs to the roof. They ensure the chapel remains in active use. Weekly masses are held, conducted by a priest from a nearby parish. The Burkas understand, even if they do not speak of it openly, that Houska is not property. It is responsibility. And responsibility, once inherited, cannot be easily abandoned. So the castle continues its quiet existence, maintained but not inhabited, watched but not used. It is not a home. It is not a fortress. It is not an administrative center. It is a weight placed upon a wound in the earth, pressing down with the combined force of stone, mortar, prayer, and human vigilance. And for 3 decades, the wait is enough. But history is long, and waits over time can shift. Sometime in the mid-14th century, the exact year is lost. An event occurs at Houska Castle that will define its legend for the next 700 years. A prisoner is brought to the castle. His crime is unrecorded. His name is not preserved. He exists in the historical record only as the condemned man. He has been sentenced to death. The execution is scheduled, but before it can be carried out, he is offered a chance, a pardon, full and unconditional. His crimes forgiven, his life returned, his freedom restored. All he must do is complete one task. He must descend into the pit beneath the chapel. He must go down on a rope as far as the rope allows, and when he returns, he must report what he saw. The offer comes from a member of the Berka of Dubois family, though which specific member is unclear. The family controls Houska at this time, and they have the authority to grant pardons. The motivation behind the offer is also unclear. Was this a genuine scientific inquiry, an attempt to understand what lay beneath the castle? Was it a test of faith, a demonstration that the pit contained nothing supernatural, only geological formations? Or was it something darker, a sacrifice disguised as an experiment, a way to appease whatever lay below by offering it a human life? We do not know. What we know is that the prisoner accepted. The preparation takes days. Rope must be sourced, strong rope, capable of bearing a man's weight. Estimates suggest they needed at least 100 meters of rope. And medieval rope was not manufactured in such lengths. Multiple sections had to be spliced together, each connection tested for strength. A harness is constructed. Leather straps are fitted around the prisoner's torso and under his arms, distributing weight to prevent injury during the descent. Torches are prepared. The prisoner will carry one, tied to his harness, to provide light. And a bell is attached to the rope, a small bronze bell, the kind used in churches. The prisoner is instructed to ring it at regular intervals, signaling that he is alive and conscious. On the day of the descent, the stone slabs covering the pit are removed. This alone is a significant undertaking. The slabs are massive, requiring multiple men with iron pry bars to lift and shift them. As the slabs are moved, the sealed crack is revealed for the first time since the castle's construction, decades earlier. The air in the chapel changes immediately. Those present report a cold draft rising from the crack. The temperature drops noticeably. The draft carries an odor, sulfurous, organic, unpleasant. Candles flicker. The flames bend toward the crack, drawn by the movement of air. The prisoner is lowered into position. He stands at the edge of the crack, looking down into darkness. The torch provides light for perhaps 5 meters. Beyond that, nothing is visible. 6 men hold the rope. They have practiced the procedure, lowering slowly, keeping tension even, ensuring the rope does not snag on the edges of the crack. A priest stands nearby. He holds a crucifix and recites prayers, the litany of saints, psalms of protection, words meant to shield the prisoner from harm, or perhaps to shield those above from whatever the prisoner might encounter. The descent begins. The prisoner steps into the crack. For the first few meters he is visible, his head, his shoulders, the torch's flame. He calls up to the men above, confirming that the harness is secure, that he is uninjured. At 5 meters his head disappears below the level of the chapel floor. Only the glow of the torch remains visible, a flickering orange light receding into the earth. At 10 meters, the rope handler calls out the depth. The prisoner rings the bell. The sound echoes up from the crack, distant but clear. At 20 meters, the bell rings again. At 30 meters, the prisoner calls up. His voice is distorted by the echoes, but his words are audible. The walls are narrowing. At 40 meters, another bell ring. At 50 meters, silence. The men holding the rope wait. They count to 100. No bell, no voice. One of the men shouts down into the crack, "Ring the bell!" No response. Some say the man who descended was mad. Others say he was preparing for something. What do you believe drove him? Type madness or purpose? The men continue lowering the rope. If the prisoner has lost consciousness, he can still be brought back. If he is injured, he can be treated. At 60 meters, the rope jerks, not pulled, jerked. A violent, sudden motion that nearly tears the line from the handler's grip. The men stagger, bracing against the force. and then the screaming begins. It does not sound like a human voice. It is too high, too raw, too sustained. It is the sound of something fundamental breaking. Not bone, not flesh, but something deeper. The priest's prayers grow louder, faster, stumbling over words in his haste. The men begin hauling the rope up, hand over hand as fast as they can, dragging the line from the depths. The screaming does not stop. It continues, unbroken, echoing up from the crack and filling the chapel with sound that seems to come from everywhere at once. At 50 meters, the torch is visible again. It is still lit, still flickering. At 40 meters, the handlers can see the prisoner's head. His mouth is open. The screaming is his, but his face shows no expression, no awareness. His eyes are open, but unfocused. At 30 meters, they can see his whole body. He is convulsing, every muscle rigid, limbs spasming against the harness. At 20 meters, the screaming becomes words, but not words in any language the men recognize. Syllables strung together without meaning, without pattern. A stream of sound that might be language or might be something else. At 10 meters, the prisoner stops screaming. His body goes limp. The men pull faster, terrified that he has died, that they are hauling up a corpse. At 5 meters, he begins laughing. High, thin, brittle laughter that is somehow worse than the screaming. And then he is out, hauled over the edge of the crack and onto the chapel floor, the harness cutting into his flesh, the torch still burning in his hand. The men release the rope and step back. The prisoner lies on the stone slabs, gasping. His eyes are open, but he is not seeing the chapel. He is seeing something else, something still present in his mind. The priest approaches, holding the crucifix forward. He begins the rites of exorcism, not because the prisoner is possessed, but because no one knows what else to do. And then someone notices. The prisoner's hair has changed. It was dark when he descended. Now it is white. Not gray, not salt and pepper. Pure white, every strand, as if decades had passed in the time he was below. His face is lined. Deep creases around his eyes. His mouth. The skin of his hands is looser, hanging in folds. He looks 20 years older than he did an hour ago. This is impossible. Hair does not turn white from shock. It is a physiological impossibility. Aging does not accelerate from trauma. But everyone present sees it. The change is undeniable. The prisoner is carried to an upper chamber. He is placed in a bed. A physician is summoned from a nearby town. The physician examines the prisoner and finds no physical injuries, no broken bones, no wounds, no signs of trauma beyond the apparent aging. But the prisoner does not speak. Not that day, not the next day, not ever again. He lives, if it can be called living, for several weeks. He eats when fed. He sleeps when laid down. But he does not respond to questions. He does not recognize faces. He does not acknowledge the world around him. And he draws. Whenever he is given charcoal or chalk, he draws the same image, circles. Concentric circles spiraling inward toward a central point. Circles within circles within circles, descending toward a center that he never completes. He fills pages with these circles, the margins of books, the walls of his chamber, his own arms, always the same pattern, always descending, always incomplete. After 3 weeks, he dies. No cause is identified. His body simply stops functioning, as if it has exhausted whatever force kept it alive. He is buried in the forest, away from the castle. No marker is placed, no name is recorded, and the stone slabs are replaced over the crack in the chapel floor. A new rule is established. The pit will never be opened again. Not for experiments, not for exploration, not for any reason. What happened during the prisoner's descent will never be explained. What he saw, what he experienced, what changed him, these questions will remain unanswered. The official position, never stated in documents, but understood by all who hear the story, is that some doors should not be opened, some depths should not be plumbed, some questions should not be asked. The pit is to remain sealed forever. And for over 600 years, it does. The story of the prisoner's descent is one of Houska Castle's defining legends. It is told and retold, each version adding or subtracting details, shaping the narrative to fit the teller's purpose. But is it true? The question matters less than it might seem. In folklore, truth is not binary. A story can be factually false and still communicate something true. A cultural anxiety, a shared fear, a collective understanding that certain boundaries should not be crossed. The prisoner's story functions this way. Whether or not a man was actually lowered into the pit in the 14th century, the story encapsulates what people believe about Houska. That it is built over something dangerous, that attempts to investigate that danger end in catastrophe, and that the only safe response is to leave the pit alone. That said, there are reasons to suspect the story contains elements of truth. First, the practice of offering condemned criminals pardons in exchange for dangerous tasks was not uncommon in medieval Europe. Prisoners were sent into plague houses to retrieve bodies. They were used to test suspicious food for poison. They were lowered into wells to clear blockages or repair walls. The logic was pragmatic. These men were already sentenced to death. If they survived the task, their lives were spared. If they died, the sentence was merely carried out in a different manner. So the core premise that a prisoner was offered a pardon for descending into the pit is plausible. Second, the detail about the rope and harness is specific. Folklore tends to be vague about logistics. But the prisoner story includes practical details: the length of rope needed, the type of harness used, the bell attached as a signaling device. This specificity suggests the story may be based on an actual event, with the practical details preserved even as the supernatural elements were added or embellished. Third, the story includes a failed outcome. Folklore often celebrates success. The hero overcomes the challenge. The task is completed. The danger is defeated. The prisoner's story ends in failure. The experiment does not yield useful information. The prisoner is destroyed. Nothing is learned. This is not the kind of ending that folklore typically invents. It is, however, the kind of ending that real events often have: ambiguous, tragic, unsatisfying. So there are reasons to believe something happened. But what exactly? The supernatural elements, the aging, the white hair, the descent into madness are almost certainly embellishments. Hair does not turn white from psychological shock. This is a myth, perpetuated by literature and repeated in folklore, but with no scientific basis. Hair color is determined by melanin production in the follicles. Trauma can cause hair loss, but it cannot change the color of existing hair. Similarly, accelerated aging does not occur from brief exposure to any known environmental condition. The prisoner could not have aged 20 years in an hour. These details are likely additions made after the fact, transformations of the original story into something more dramatic, more memorable, more suited to legend. But the core event, a man descending into the pit and returning psychologically shattered, is consistent with known effects of extreme psychological trauma. If the prisoner descended into a deep, narrow fissure, spending time in complete darkness, breathing air contaminated with toxic gases, hearing echoes and sounds that he could not identify, he could certainly have experienced a psychotic break. The crack beneath Houska is known to emit gases: hydrogen sulfide, methane, and other compounds produced by geological processes or organic decomposition. These gases can cause hallucinations, disorientation, and panic. In a confined space, in darkness, without context or understanding, these effects would be terrifying. A person exposed to such conditions might easily suffer permanent psychological damage. So the prisoner's madness is plausible. Not caused by supernatural forces, but by a combination of toxic gas exposure, sensory deprivation, and extreme fear. The story, then, might be understood as a medieval attempt to explain a real event using the conceptual framework available at the time. A man descended into the pit and was destroyed, not by demons, but by conditions that had no scientific explanation in the 14th century. The supernatural interpretation was the only interpretation available. But there is another possibility, one that is less comforting. What if the prisoner saw something? Not demons, not monsters, but something real, something down in the depths of the crack that should not be there. Medieval Europe was riddled with cave systems, some of which contained things that would seem monstrous to people encountering them for the first time. Colonies of bats, blind albino creatures adapted to underground life, geological formations that resembled skeletal remains. If the prisoner encountered such things, seen by torchlight, distorted by echoes, interpreted through a framework of Christian demonology, he might have believed he had descended into hell itself, and that belief, sincerely held, would be enough to break his mind. So the story of the prisoner's descent can be read multiple ways: as pure folklore, a cautionary tale with no historical basis, invented to explain why the pit should never be opened; as distorted history, a real event, embellished over time, with supernatural elements added to a mundane but traumatic experience; or as something in between, a real event, truthfully described within the limits of medieval understanding, documenting an encounter with something geological, biological, or psychological that defied explanation. The truth is likely some combination of all three. What matters is the effect. After the prisoner's descent, the pit is never opened again. The rule is absolute. The stone slabs remain in place, and the story spreads. It becomes part of Houska's mythology, a warning embedded in narrative form. Do not open the pit. Do not investigate. Do not question. Some things are sealed for a reason. Locals still refuse to enter the East Wing at night. Would you walk through these halls after dark? Just say yes or no below. The prisoner's story raises a fundamental question. Why do we need to believe Houska Castle is haunted? The castle exists. The pit exists. These are facts. But the legends, the demons, the gateway to hell, the supernatural forces contained beneath the chapel floor, these are not facts. They are narratives, stories, constructed to explain and give meaning to what is otherwise just an unusual piece of architecture built over a geological anomaly. So why do these narratives persist? One answer is simple. People need stories to make sense of fear. Fear is a useful evolutionary adaptation. It keeps us away from danger. But fear without explanation is unbearable. Anxiety without object creates paralysis. So we invent objects. We create narratives that give shape to our fear, that locate it in a specific place with a specific cause. Houska provides that location. The pit provides that cause. And the legends of demons and damnation provide the narrative framework that makes the fear comprehensible. This is not unique to Houska. Cultures around the world create similar stories about places that inspire dread. Bottomless pits, haunted forests, cursed ruins. These are universal motifs, appearing in folklore from every region and era. What makes Houska distinctive is not the presence of these stories, but their durability. The legends have persisted for over 700 years, surviving changes in language, religion, political systems, and scientific understanding. Why? Because the castle itself reinforces the legends. Its architecture is strange. Its history is unsettling. Its location is isolated. Every physical detail about Houska suggests that something is wrong, that this is not a normal place, that the stories might be true. And because no one has ever definitively disproven the legends, the pit has never been fully explored. The exact depth is unknown. What lies at the bottom, if there is a bottom, remains a mystery. This absence of definitive information leaves space for belief. As long as the pit remains sealed, as long as no one descends to the bottom and returns with mundane explanations, the possibility of the supernatural remains open, and humans are remarkably good at filling open possibilities with narrative. But there is another answer, one that is more uncomfortable. What if the legends persist because they are functionally useful? Consider what the legends accomplish. They keep people away. They discourage exploration. They ensure that the pit remains sealed and the castle remains maintained. In other words, the legends function as a social technology, a mechanism for preserving behavior across generations. If the only reason to maintain Houska is bureaucratic, it's a historical monument, then support for maintenance can erode. Budgets can be cut. Responsibilities can be neglected. But if people believe the castle is holding back demonic forces, if they believe that abandoning the structure would unleash catastrophe, then maintenance becomes urgent, non-negotiable, essential. The legends create social pressure to preserve the seal. They are not just stories. They are instructions disguised as entertainment, and they work. For 7 centuries, Houska has been maintained. Through wars, political upheavals, economic collapses, and changes in ownership, the castle has never been abandoned. The chapel has never been left to decay. The pit has never been reopened. The legends have ensured this continuity. Whether the legends are true in a literal sense is almost irrelevant. They are true in a functional sense. They produce the behavior necessary to keep the seal intact. This is a deeply pragmatic view of folklore. It suggests that stories are not just reflections of belief, but tools for shaping behavior. And if we accept this view, then we must also accept a troubling implication. The people who created and spread these legends might have known they were not literally true, but told them anyway because the alternative, explaining the need for maintenance in purely rational terms, was less likely to succeed. In other words, the gateway to hell might be a lie told for a good reason, but there is a third possibility, one that resists both the skeptical and the pragmatic interpretations. What if the legends persist because, on some level, they are true? Not true in the sense of literal demons and theological hell, but true in the sense that the pit represents something genuinely dangerous, something that our ancestors correctly identified as a threat, even if they lacked the scientific vocabulary to describe it accurately. The crack beneath Houska emits toxic gases. This is documented. These gases can cause hallucinations, illness, and death. In a pre-scientific society, people experiencing these effects would not understand them as chemical reactions. They would understand them as demonic influence, as the presence of evil. But the response would be the same. Avoid the crack. Seal it. Build over it. The legends in this interpretation are not inventions. They are translations. They take a real danger and describe it using the conceptual tools available at the time. Demons are not literally climbing out of the pit, but something harmful is emerging. Gases, sounds, psychological effects. And the medieval response was to treat these effects as if they were demonic, because that framework led to the correct behavior, containment. So when we ask whether the legends are true, we are asking the wrong question. The better question is, do the legends successfully communicate a real danger? And the answer to that question is yes. Houska Castle stands over a geological feature that, if left unsealed, could harm people. The crack emits gases. It creates acoustic effects. It presents physical dangers, falling, getting trapped, exposure to toxic environments. The legends communicate these dangers in narrative form. They say, "This place is not safe. Do not enter. Do not disturb." And for 700 years, people have listened. That is the truth of the legends. Not literal, not supernatural, but functional. They keep people away from danger. And in doing so, they serve the same purpose as any warning sign, any caution tape, any locked door. The difference is that legends are more durable than signs, more memorable than warnings, more likely to be passed from generation to generation. A sign can be ignored. A legend cannot. And so, the legends persist, doing their work, keeping the pit sealed, and the castle standing. Whether we believe them or not is almost beside the point. They believe in us. They believe we will continue to tell them, to repeat them, to act on them. And so far they have been proven right. Every mirror in the castle was reportedly covered before past occupants left. Superstition? Or did they know something? Let's hear your theory. In 1584, 300 years after Houska Castle's construction, the property changes hands. The new owners are the Herzog of Harasov family, a noble house with significant wealth and a taste for Renaissance aesthetics. They look at the Gothic fortress in the forest and see potential, not for military use, not for administration, but for transformation. The Renaissance has reached Bohemia. Across the kingdom, old medieval structures are being updated, retrofitted with decorative elements that reflect humanist ideals and classical influences. Heavy Gothic forms are softened with carved details. Fortress interiors are converted into comfortable living spaces. The Herzog family decides to apply this sensibility to Houska. The renovation takes 6 years, from 1584 to 1590. It is not a full reconstruction. The basic Gothic structure remains intact, but a cosmetic and functional update designed to make the castle more habitable. New windows are installed, larger than the original narrow slits, allowing more light into the interior. Doorways are carved with decorative frames. Wood paneling is added to key rooms, providing insulation and visual warmth. A green chamber is created on the second floor, a room decorated with late Gothic and early Renaissance paintings depicting pastoral scenes, hunting parties, and heraldic symbols. The walls are painted in soft greens and golds, creating a space that feels almost welcoming. A knight's drawing room is established, furnished with carved wooden chairs, tables, tapestries. This room is designed for social gatherings, for entertaining guests, for demonstrating that Houska is not just a fortress, but a refined country estate. The renovations are expensive. Skilled artisans are brought from Prague and other regional centers. Materials are imported. Fine woods, quality pigments, metalwork. The Herzog family spares little expense, but they make one crucial decision. The chapel is not renovated. The frescoes are not repainted. The floor is not replaced. The stone slabs remain exactly as they were 3 centuries earlier. This is not neglect. It is deliberate preservation. The Herzog family understands, as every owner before them has understood, that the chapel is not a decorative space. It is a functional one. It is the seal. And the seal must not be altered. So they update the rest of the castle, softening its Gothic severity, adding Renaissance elegance, but they leave the chapel untouched. The result is a strange duality. Houska becomes a castle with 2 faces. From the outside, it remains severe, Gothic, fortress-like. The thick walls, the narrow windows, the heavy roofline, all of these remain unchanged. The exterior communicates seriousness, permanence, a structure built to endure. But inside, the upper floors are transformed. The green chamber with its soft colors and pastoral scenes, the knight's drawing room with its comfortable furnishings. These spaces suggest refinement, leisure, a place where nobles might actually choose to spend time. The duality is not accidental. It reflects the castle's dual purpose. It is a fortress, yes, but not against human enemies, against whatever lies below. And it is a residence occasionally, but not a home. A place to visit, to use, but never to fully inhabit. The Herzan family does occupy Houska, at least part-time. They host guests. They hold small gatherings. The castle, for the first time in its history, experiences something resembling normal domestic life. But the occupation is never permanent. The family has other estates, more comfortable and more conveniently located. Houska is a summer retreat, a novelty, a curiosity to show visitors. And the chapel remains closed except for weekly masses, conducted by a priest from the nearest parish, attended by caretakers, and occasionally by family members, always brief, always somber. The Renaissance renovations do accomplish one significant thing. They make Houska more attractive to visitors. Scholars begin to arrive, historians interested in Gothic architecture, theologians curious about the chapel's unusual frescoes, natural philosophers, the forerunners of scientists, intrigued by reports of the pit. The Herzan family accommodates these visitors. They provide tours. They allow sketches to be made of the frescoes. They permit measurements to be taken of the castle's dimensions, but they do not allow access to the sealed sections. The foundation remains off-limits. The stone slabs are not lifted. Requests to explore the pit are politely but firmly denied. This restriction frustrates some visitors. Why renovate the castle and then keep parts of it closed? Why invite scholarly inquiry and then limit access? The Herzan family offers vague explanations, structural concerns, safety risks, respect for sacred space. But the real reason is simpler. Some doors stay closed because they must. The visitors leave with their sketches and measurements, and they write accounts of their visits. These accounts circulate in letters, in early printed books, in the correspondence networks that connect scholars across Europe. And with these accounts, Houska's reputation spreads beyond Bohemia. The castle becomes known internationally, not as a military fortification or a noble residence, but as a curiosity. The Gothic castle built over a pit, the fortress with legends of demonic containment. The Renaissance renovation, paradoxically, makes Houska more famous as a site of mystery. By making the castle more accessible and more presentable, the Herzan family inadvertently amplifies the legends, because now the legends are not just local folklore. They are part of a European discourse about the supernatural, about the boundaries between the known and the unknown, about places where the earth itself seems to hold secrets. Houska becomes, in the late 16th century, what it will remain for the next 4 centuries, a destination for people seeking encounters with the mysterious, the liminal, the unsettling. They come expecting to be frightened, to feel a frisson of dread, to stand in the chapel and imagine what lies below. And the castle does not disappoint. Even with the Renaissance renovations, even with the green chamber's soft colors and the knight's drawing room's comfortable furniture, the castle retains its essential strangeness. The walls still face inward. The chapel is still cold. The pit is still sealed. And visitors still leave with the sense that they have stood in a place where the world is thinner than it should be, where the boundary between here and elsewhere is measured not in meters of stone, but in something more fragile. The Herzan family's tenure ends in the early 17th century. The castle passes to other owners, each of whom maintains it, updates it slightly, but never fundamentally alters it. The Renaissance renovations remain. The green chamber is preserved. The knight's drawing room continues to host occasional visitors. But the chapel stays the same, untouched, unchanged, perpetually medieval, because that is what it must be. Not a relic, not a museum piece, a seal. And seals, once placed, are not removed. The Green Chamber is Houska Castle's most visually pleasant space. It is a room that suggests normalcy, comfort, the possibility that the castle could be something other than a fortress built over dread. The chamber occupies a corner of the second floor, positioned to receive light from two directions. The windows, enlarged during the Renaissance renovations, allow morning sun to fill the space with warm, angled light. The walls are painted in soft shades of green, hence the name. The pigments used were expensive, derived from minerals and plants, mixed by skilled artisans to create a color that is neither dark nor bright, but somewhere in between. A shade that evokes forests, gardens, growth. Over the green base, late Gothic and Renaissance murals have been applied. These paintings depict idealized scenes of courtly life. Nobles on horseback, riding through wooded landscapes, musicians playing lutes and harps, ladies in elaborate gowns, holding flowers, hunting parties with dogs and falcons, banquet tables laden with food. The scenes are pastoral, peaceful, deliberately removed from the violence and uncertainty of medieval life. They present a fantasy of aristocratic existence, refined, leisurely, secure. This is Renaissance propaganda, the visual assertion that nobility is defined not by martial prowess, but by cultural sophistication. The Green Chamber is designed to communicate this message. It is a room where the Houska family could receive guests and demonstrate their refinement, their alignment with contemporary aesthetic trends. But the room contains an anomaly. On the western wall, partially obscured by a painted tree in the mural, there is a bricked-up doorway. The doorway is approximately 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide, standard dimensions for interior doors of the period. It has been filled with bricks and then plastered over, and the mural has been painted across the plaster as if the doorway never existed. But it did exist. The outline is faintly visible. The bricks are slightly different in color from the surrounding stone. And anyone running their hand across the wall can feel the irregularity, the slight depression where the doorway was. There is no record of where this doorway led. No architectural plans survive from the Renaissance renovation. No family documents mention the bricking up of doorways. No correspondence explains the decision. The doorway is simply there, sealed, hidden, painted over, but undeniably present. Speculation about its original purpose has circulated for centuries. Some suggest it led to a private staircase, allowing the castle's owners to move between floors without passing through public spaces. Such staircases were common in noble residences, providing convenience and privacy. Others claim the doorway opened onto a balcony or external platform, later removed due to structural concerns or changes in the castle's exterior design. But local folklore offers a darker interpretation. The doorway led downward, toward the foundation, toward the chapel, toward the pit. According to this version, the Houska family bricked up the doorway deliberately, not for aesthetic reasons, but for containment. The doorway was a vulnerability, a potential passage through which something from below could reach the upper floors. By sealing it, they added another layer of protection, another barrier between the inhabited spaces and the sealed pit. Is this true? There is no evidence. But the bricked-up doorway does suggest that the Houska family, despite their Renaissance sensibilities, took the castle's legends seriously. They renovated, they decorated, they made Houska habitable. But they also sealed doors. They left the chapel untouched. They ensured that certain boundaries remained intact. The Green Chamber, for all its pastoral murals and soft colors, is not entirely removed from the castle's darker purpose. Even in the most welcoming room, there is a reminder. Something has been closed off. Something has been deliberately hidden. Visitors to the Green Chamber often remark on the contrast. The room feels light, pleasant, almost cheerful, until you notice the bricked-up doorway. And then the cheerfulness fades, replaced by a question. What was on the other side? The question has no answer. The doorway has never been reopened. Radar and sonar imaging, conducted in recent years, suggest that behind the bricks, there is indeed a void, a small chamber or passage, but further investigation has not been authorized. The current owners of Houska, like the Herzan family before them, prefer to leave certain things undisturbed, so the Green Chamber remains as it is, beautiful, welcoming, and marked by an absence, a doorway that leads nowhere. Or perhaps more accurately, a doorway that leads somewhere, but somewhere we have decided not to go. The chamber is popular with tourists. It photographs well. The murals are Instagram-friendly. The soft green light creates an atmosphere that is calming, almost meditative. But guides always point out the bricked-up doorway. They tell the story, or the various stories, since no single version is authoritative. They let visitors speculate, and visitors do speculate. They take photos of the wall. They run their hands across the plaster, feeling for the outline. They wonder. Because the doorway is a perfect microcosm of Houska itself, a place where the visible and the hidden overlap, where the known and the unknown exist in uncomfortable proximity, where curiosity is invited but never fully satisfied. The Green Chamber says, "You are welcome here. Look at the murals. Enjoy the light. Appreciate the craftsmanship. But also, there are limits. There are doors we do not open. There are questions we do not answer. And that duality, the welcoming and the withholding, is Houska's essential character. It is a castle that invites you in but never lets you all the way. It offers partial access, partial knowledge, partial comfort. The rest remains sealed. Some say the walls were built 12 feet thick in places for defense. Others say it was to contain something inside. Comment what you think they were protecting against. The year is 1618. Europe is about to tear itself apart. The 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history, begins with a rebellion in Bohemia. What starts as a local dispute over religious freedom escalates into a continental war that will kill an estimated 8 million people and devastate entire regions. Bohemia is at the war's center. Armies march across the countryside. Cities are besieged. Villages are burned. Castles, regardless of their original purpose, become military assets, seized, occupied, fortified, or destroyed, depending on strategic value. Houska Castle, remote and defensively useless, should be ignored. But it is not. In 1640, a Swedish army detachment sweeps through northern Bohemia. They are not a formal military unit, but a mercenary force, soldiers of fortune operating under loose command, driven as much by plunder as by strategy. They seize Houska. The reasons are unclear. The castle offers no strategic advantage. It is not positioned to control trade routes or block enemy movements. It cannot support a large garrison. It has no water source. But the Swedes occupy it anyway, and they stay for 2 years. The commander of this force is a man known as Oranto. His full name is not recorded. He appears in regional accounts only as the Swedish commander, or the rogue Oranto. He is described as a mercenary with a reputation for brutality and, more unusually, an interest in the occult. Oranto is not a typical soldier, he reads. He collects books, rare for a military commander of his class. He corresponds with scholars and mystics. He is interested in alchemy, astrology, demonology, and he has heard the legends of Houska. Under Oranto's command, the Swedish occupation takes on a strange character. The soldiers engage in the usual activities of occupying forces, raiding nearby villages for food, stealing livestock, conscripting labor. But Oranto himself spends most of his time inside the castle, specifically inside the chapel. Locals report seeing him there at all hours, sometimes alone, sometimes with a priest or scholar he has coerced into accompanying him. He studies the frescoes. He measures the stone slabs covering the pit. He interrogates anyone who knows the castle's history. He wants to know about the prisoner, about the descent, about what lies below. Oranto, according to these accounts, believes the pit contains something valuable, not gold or treasure in the conventional sense, but power, knowledge, some force or entity that, if contacted or controlled, could be harnessed. This belief is not unique to Oranto. The 17th century is saturated with occult philosophy, with the idea that hidden knowledge exists in marginal places, ancient ruins, sealed tombs, bottomless pits. Magicians and alchemists search for this knowledge, convinced that mastering it will grant them extraordinary abilities. Oranto is one of these seekers. And Houska, with its legends and its sealed pit, is exactly the kind of place he believes holds secrets, but he never finds them, or at least he never successfully extracts them. For 2 years, Oranto and his men occupy Houska. They live in the upper chambers. They use the courtyard for training. They fortify the walls, not against external attack, but adding barricades and reinforcements whose purpose is unclear. Locals who supply the castle with food report strange activities, lights in the chapel at night, sounds, not screaming, but something else, rhythmic, repetitive, like chanting or drumming, and occasionally silence, total absolute silence, as if the castle had been emptied, even though the soldiers are known to be inside. In 1642, without warning, the Swedes abandon Houska. There is no battle, no siege, no military reason for retreat. They simply leave, taking almost nothing with them. When locals cautiously approach the castle after the departure, they find it essentially intact. Furniture is still in place. Fires are cold, but recently extinguished. Food sits on tables, uneaten. And in the chapel, they find something disturbing. The stone slabs covering the pit have been disturbed, not removed entirely, but shifted, as if someone attempted to pry them up to access the crack below, but stopped before completing the task. Tool marks scar the edges of the slabs. The mortar is gouged, and nearby, abandoned on the floor, are iron pry bars, heavy tools, clearly used with force. Why did the Swedes try to open the pit? Why did they stop? No records provide answers. Oranto disappears from history after 1642. There is no death record, no further military appointments, no mention of him in subsequent accounts of the 30 Years' War. He simply ceases to exist in the archives, as if he had walked through a door and never returned. The most common interpretation, repeated in folklore and local history, is that Oranto attempted to open the pit, experienced something that terrified him, and fled. What he experienced is left unspecified. The story does not require details. The fact of his departure is enough to reinforce the message, do not disturb the seal. But there are other interpretations. Perhaps Oranto succeeded in opening the pit partially, found nothing of value, and abandoned the project out of frustration rather than fear. Perhaps his men mutinied, refusing to continue an occult experiment they saw as heretical or insane. Perhaps external military pressures, shifts in the war, threats from rival forces, compelled him to withdraw suddenly, and the attempt on the pit was left incomplete. We do not know. We have only the evidence: disturbed slabs, abandoned tools, a sudden departure. And the aftermath? The pit is resealed immediately. The slabs are repositioned, new mortar applied, and the chapel is reconsecrated by a priest brought from Prague. The Swedish occupation becomes another layer of Houska's legend, another warning, Another example of what happens when someone tries to open what should remain closed. The castle stands empty for years after the Swedes leave. The 30 Years' War continues, but Houska is not occupied again. It is left to decay quietly, gradually, until the war ends in 1648 and some semblance of peace returns to Bohemia. Every mirror in the castle was reportedly covered before past occupants left. Superstition, or did they know something? Let's hear your theory. After the Swedish occupation, Houska Castle enters its longest period of abandonment. The 30 Years' War ends in 1648, but Bohemia is devastated. Populations have been decimated by violence, plague, and famine. Infrastructure is destroyed. Noble families that survived the war are preoccupied with rebuilding their primary estates, not maintaining remote castles with dubious value. Houska is neglected, not formally abandoned. Ownership continues to pass through noble families, appearing on deeds and inheritance documents, but functionally empty. The roof begins to leak, timber rots, stone cracks from freeze-thaw cycles. Plants take root in the courtyard. The forest encroaches, and within a generation, the castle is partially hidden by trees, but the chapel is maintained. This is the strange exception to the neglect. Even as the rest of the castle decays, even as walls crumble and windows fall out, the chapel remains intact. The stone slabs covering the pit are checked regularly, the mortar is repaired, the door is kept locked, and monthly masses continue, held by a priest from the nearest parish, attended by no one except perhaps a caretaker or two. Why? Because the decay of the castle is acceptable. The decay of the seal is not. This distinction reveals Houska's true purpose. It is not a residence that happens to have a chapel. It is a seal that happens to be housed in a castle. As long as the seal holds, the rest can crumble. This period of abandonment lasts for over a century. Throughout the 18th century and into the 19th, Houska is a ruin in the making, picturesque in the romantic sense, slowly returning to the forest, gradually erasing the human effort that created it. Travelers occasionally pass through the area and remark on the decaying castle. Sketches and paintings are made, showing Houska overgrown with ivy, its walls broken, its courtyard filled with weeds. These images circulate in the Romantic movement's fascination with ruins, with the sublime, with the melancholic beauty of decay. But Houska is never fully abandoned. There is always someone watching, always a caretaker, even if just a single elderly man living in one habitable room, checking the chapel floor every morning, ensuring the seal remains intact. This continuity is remarkable. Across wars, regime changes, economic collapses, and centuries of disinterest, someone has always been responsible for Houska. The responsibility is inherited, passed down through families, through church networks, through informal agreements that never appear in official documents. It is a covenant, maintained by people who may not fully believe the legends, but who understand that some responsibilities cannot be abandoned simply because they seem irrational. In 1841, the Sternberg family purchases Houska as part of a larger estate consolidation. They are one of Bohemia's oldest and most prestigious noble houses, and they recognize the castle's historical significance. They fund major repairs. The roof is replaced. Walls are repointed. The courtyard is cleared. The castle, for the first time in nearly 2 centuries, is made structurally sound. But the Sternbergs do not live there. Like the Herzan family before them, they maintain Houska as a secondary property, a historical monument, a curiosity, a title on a deed. The chapel remains the focus of their attention. It is not just repaired, but enhanced. New frescoes are commissioned to replace sections that have deteriorated beyond saving. The altar is refinished. The door is replaced with a heavier, more secure version. The Sternbergs are taking no chances. They are ensuring that the seal, whatever its purpose, is reinforced for another few centuries. Throughout the later 19th century, Houska begins to attract more visitors. The romantic fascination with ruins evolves into a Victorian fascination with the Gothic, the macabre, the supernatural. Ghost stories are in vogue. Haunted castles become tourist attractions, and Houska, with its legends of a gateway to hell, is perfectly positioned to capitalize on this trend. The Sternberg family accommodates visitors, charging modest fees for tours. Guides are hired, local men who know the legends and can tell them with appropriate dramatic flair. The tours focus on the chapel. Visitors are brought into the cold, echoing space and told about the pit, the prisoner, the Swedish commander, the centuries of legends. They stand on the stone slabs and imagine what lies below. They listen to the echoes and convince themselves they hear something more than just their own voices. And they leave satisfied, having experienced a brush with the uncanny, a moment of uncertainty, a story they can retell at dinner parties. For the Sternberg family, this is a practical arrangement. The modest income from tours helps offset the cost of maintaining the castle, and the tours themselves serve a function. They keep the legends alive. As long as people believe Houska is haunted, as long as the stories circulate, the castle will be maintained, because no one wants to be responsible for the structure that failed to contain whatever it was built to contain. The Victorian period also sees the first systematic attempts to investigate the pit using modern methods. In 1887, a team from the University of Prague requests permission to conduct a geological survey. They want to lower instruments into the crack, measure its depth, take air samples, understand what lies below. The Sternberg family denies the request. No explanation is given, but the refusal is absolute. The researchers protest. They argue that understanding the pit is a matter of scientific interest, that the legends are superstition, that modern methods can provide definitive answers. The Sternbergs remain unmoved. The pit will not be opened. The slabs will not be lifted. The matter is closed. This pattern repeats throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Researchers request access. The family refuses. The pit remains sealed. Why? One interpretation is that the family genuinely believes the legends and refuses investigation out of fear. Another interpretation is more pragmatic. The legends are economically useful. If the pit is investigated and found to be mundane, just a geological fissure, nothing supernatural, nothing interesting, the castle loses its mystique. Tourism declines. The motivation to maintain the structure weakens. Better to preserve the mystery, better to leave the question unanswered, because unanswered questions are more valuable than disappointing answers. In 1924, the Sternberg family sells Houska to Josef Szymonek, the president of Škoda Works, one of Czechoslovakia's largest industrial corporations and one of its wealthiest men. Szymonek sees potential. He envisions Houska as a summer retreat, a private estate where he can entertain guests and escape Prague's urban intensity. He invests heavily. Extensive renovations are undertaken between 1929 and 1930. The castle is modernized, electricity installed, plumbing added, interiors furnished with contemporary pieces. For the first time since the Renaissance, Houska is genuinely habitable. It is no longer a crumbling ruin maintained out of obligation, but a functional residence. Szymonek hosts parties. Artists, intellectuals, business leaders gather in the Green Chamber and the Knight's Drawing Room. The castle experiences a brief golden age, but this golden age is fragile. The world is changing rapidly. Political tensions are rising, and within a decade everything will collapse again. They left behind personal letters, jewelry, and unopened wine bottles. Why would a family abandon such treasures? Comment your best theory. The years between 1924 and 1939 represent a unique moment in Houska Castle's history. For perhaps the only time in 7 centuries, the structure functions as its Renaissance renovators might have intended, as a residence. Józef Szymonek is 53 years old when he purchases Houska. He is at the height of his career, a self-made industrialist who transformed Škoda from a regional manufacturer into an international powerhouse. He is also a man of cultural interests. He collects art. He sponsors musicians and writers. He believes that wealth should be used not just for luxury, but for patronage, for the support of culture and intellectual life. Houska appeals to him on multiple levels. It is historical, a Gothic structure with Renaissance additions. It is remote, offering privacy, an escape from Prague's social obligations. And it is mysterious, carrying legends that add a romantic dimension to the property. Szymonek does not believe in demons. He is a modern man, a man of industry and rationality. But he appreciates the atmosphere the legends create. They make Houska interesting. They give it character. The renovations he commissions are extensive and expensive. The castle is wired for electricity, a significant undertaking in a structure built without any consideration for modern utilities. Cables are run through existing walls. Fixtures are installed in every room. Plumbing is added. A modern bathroom is constructed on the second floor, requiring the installation of pipes, a water heater, and a septic system. This alone costs a substantial sum. The interiors are furnished with pieces that blend historical and contemporary aesthetics. The Green Chamber receives new upholstery on period-style furniture. The knight's drawing room is fitted with bookcases, a writing desk, comfortable seating. The courtyard is landscaped. Gravel is laid. Planters are installed. The effect is to soften the castle's Gothic severity, to make it feel less like a fortress and more like a country estate. The chapel, notably, is not modernized. Electricity is not extended to it. No plumbing disturbs its structure. It is cleaned, repaired where necessary, but left fundamentally unchanged. Szymonek understands, even if he does not believe the legends, that the chapel has a symbolic importance that should not be compromised. Once the renovations are complete, Szymonek begins using Houska as he intended, for relaxation and entertainment. Summer weekends are spent at the castle. He invites friends, artists from Prague's avant-garde scene, musicians, writers, fellow industrialists. They gather in the drawing room, drink wine, discuss politics and philosophy. The castle becomes known as a salon, a place where ideas are exchanged and culture is celebrated. It is a brief, shining moment, a glimpse of what Houska might have been if it had been built for different purposes. Photographs from this period survive. They show well-dressed men and women standing in the courtyard, smiling. They show the Green Chamber lit by electric lamps, the furniture occupied, the space animated by human presence. In one photograph, Szymonek himself stands near the castle entrance, hands in pockets, looking relaxed and content. He is proud of this place. He has transformed a crumbling ruin into something beautiful. But there are signs, even in these photographs, that the transformation is incomplete. In one image, taken in the courtyard, the castle looms in the background, solid, heavy, its walls thick and imposing. The people in the foreground, despite their modern clothing and confident postures, look small against the structure. In another, someone has photographed the chapel door from inside the castle. It is closed, locked, marked with a heavy iron handle. The door looks out of place among the renovated interiors, too medieval, too severe, a reminder that parts of the castle resist modernization. Visitors to Houska during this period report mixed impressions. The upper floors are comfortable, even elegant, but the ground floor, particularly near the chapel, retains a coldness, an atmosphere that electric lights and modern furnishings cannot dispel. One guest, a poet named František, writes in his diary, "Szymonek has made Houska livable, but he has not made it welcoming. There is something about the place that resists habitation. You can furnish the rooms, light the lamps, fill the halls with conversation. But when the conversation stops, the silence underneath is too deep. Szymonek dismisses such concerns. He is a practical man. He does not believe in atmospheres or feelings. If the castle seems cold, it is because the stone retains temperature poorly. If it seems quiet, it is because the forest muffles sound. But even Szymonek makes certain concessions to the castle's history. He does not sleep in the rooms closest to the chapel. He does not enter the chapel alone. And he ensures that the monthly masses continue, attended by a priest, even though Szymonek himself is not particularly religious. These are small concessions, easy to rationalize, but they suggest that on some level, even the most rational owner of Houska feels the need to respect certain boundaries. The Golden Age lasts less than a decade. In 1938, the Munich Agreement cedes portions of Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany. In 1939, Germany invades and occupies the remaining Czech lands. Szymonek, as president of Škoda Works, is forced to collaborate with the occupation authorities. His factories are converted to produce weapons for the German war effort. He retains his position, but he has no real power. Houska Castle is requisitioned. Szymonek is allowed to retain nominal ownership, but he cannot access the property. The Nazis occupy it for their own purposes, and Szymonek, along with everyone else, is left to wonder, what are they doing in there? The last photograph of Szymonek at Houska is dated 1937. He stands in the courtyard, older now, grayer, but still confident. Behind him, the castle looks solid, permanent, a structure that will outlast any individual occupant. Within 2 years, he will never return. The last known photograph shows the family standing at the entrance. 1 week later, they were gone. What do you think happened? Share your thoughts. In October 1939, Czechoslovakia ceases to exist as an independent state. The Czech lands become the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, a puppet regime controlled by Nazi Germany. Across the protectorate, properties are seized, requisitioned, redistributed, according to the occupier's needs. Factories are converted to war production. Estates are turned into administrative centers or military facilities. Houska Castle, remote and architecturally odd, should be ignored. It has no industrial value, no strategic position, no resources worth extracting. And yet, in 1940, the SS occupies Houska. The Schutzstaffel, the SS, is not merely a military organization. It is the Nazi Party's ideological vanguard, responsible for implementing racial policies, operating concentration camps, and pursuing Heinrich Himmler's obsession with occult research. Himmler, the SS leader, believes that ancient knowledge holds the key to German supremacy. He funds archaeological expeditions searching for Aryan artifacts. He collects libraries on mysticism, witchcraft, and esoteric traditions. He establishes research units dedicated to exploring the supernatural. The SS unit that occupies Houska is small, perhaps 20 men. They are not combat troops. They include officers, scientists, and technicians. They bring equipment, crates of instruments, boxes of documents, materials that locals cannot identify. They seal the castle. Guards are posted at the perimeter. No one from the surrounding villages is allowed to approach. Deliveries of food and supplies are made, but the delivery personnel are not permitted past the gates. For 5 years, the Nazis operate within Houska's walls. What they do there is never officially documented. The occupation appears in no major Wehrmacht logs. There are no surviving reports, no photographs, no correspondence that explains the purpose of the operation. But there is evidence, physical evidence discovered after the war, that suggests experiments. Bullet holes in the chapel walls, dozens of them, concentrated near the floor, as if something low to the ground was being shot at repeatedly. Scratch marks on the stone slabs covering the pit. Deep gouges, made with metal tools, suggesting sustained efforts to pry the slabs up. Burn marks on the chapel floor. Scorch patterns that do not correspond to any practical use of fire. Not torches, not heating, but something else. Ritual markings, perhaps, or experiments involving combustion. And in the upper chambers, modifications. Walls have been reinforced with steel plating. New locks have been installed on doors. Heavy mechanisms far beyond what would be needed for standard security. These modifications suggest the occupants were concerned about containment, not containment of prisoners. Houska is too small to serve as a prison, but containment of something else. Locals living within a few kilometers of the castle report strange phenomena during the Nazi occupation. Lights visible through the narrow windows at all hours. Not steady electric light, but flickering like flames or strobes. Sounds, mechanical sounds, generators, engines, but also other sounds. Rhythmic, repetitive, somewhere between machinery and music, and occasionally screaming. Whether the screaming was human or animal, no one could say. It was distant, muffled by stone walls and forest, but it was there, recurring irregularly over the 5 years of occupation, and vibrations. People living nearby reported feeling vibrations in the ground, particularly at night. Not earthquakes, nothing so violent, but a low-frequency rumbling, as if something heavy was operating underground. These reports are anecdotal. They come from traumatized populations living under brutal occupation. They may be exaggerated, misremembered, conflated with other wartime experiences, but they are consistent. Multiple sources, from different villages, describe similar phenomena. So what were the Nazis doing? One theory, widely repeated, is that they were conducting occult research. The SS, particularly Himmler's inner circle, had documented interests in contacting supernatural entities, harnessing mystical forces, seeking hidden knowledge. Houska, with its legends of a gateway to hell, would have been an irresistible target. If the Nazis believed the pit actually led somewhere, to another realm, to a source of power, to something that could be contacted or controlled, then occupying the castle and attempting to open the pit would make sense within their ideological framework. This theory is supported by the physical evidence, the attempts to pry up the stone slabs, the bullet holes, perhaps shooting at something that emerged. The burn marks, ritual magic, often involves fire. But there are alternative explanations. Perhaps the Nazis were using Houska as a storage facility for looted artifacts or sensitive documents. The castle's remoteness and lack of strategic value would make it unlikely to be bombed or raided. Perhaps they were conducting weapons testing. The thick walls and isolated location would provide a secure environment for experiments that needed to be kept secret. Perhaps they were using the castle for psychological experiments on prisoners. The chapel's unsettling atmosphere, combined with sensory deprivation and exposure to the legends, could be used to break subjects mentally. We do not know. The Nazi records that might explain the occupation were either never created, were destroyed before the end of the war, or remain classified in archives that have never been fully opened. What we know is that when Soviet forces liberated the region in May 1945, Houska was found abandoned. The Nazis had left in a hurry. Equipment was smashed. Documents were burned in the courtyard. Piles of ash and charred paper were found, too damaged to reconstruct. And in the chapel, the stone slabs covering the pit were out of alignment, not removed, but shifted, as if the final act before evacuation had been a last, desperate attempt to open the pit, or to ensure it remained sealed. In the center of the chapel floor, someone had drawn a symbol in chalk, a circle with radiating lines, like a sunburst, or a portal opening, or an eye. It was photographed by Soviet soldiers, then scrubbed away. The photograph survives in military archives, but its meaning has never been explained. The Nazi occupation adds another layer to Houska's legend. Whatever the truth of what happened, the fact remains. The SS occupied a remote castle for 5 years, conducted activities they did not document, and left in circumstances that suggest either failure or terror. And the pit remained sealed. Barely, but sealed. Today, the castle still stands. Some say it's cursed, others say it's just forgotten. What keeps you more intrigued? The paranormal or the historical truth? Type paranormal or history. The liberation of Czechoslovakia in 1945 does not return Houska Castle to normalcy. Nothing about Houska has ever been normal. And the Nazi occupation has only deepened its strangeness. When Soviet forces secure the region, the castle is inspected. Officers walk the halls, catalog the damage, note the abandoned equipment and burned documents. The chapel draws particular attention. The bullet holes, the scratch marks, the misaligned slabs. All of this is documented in Soviet military reports. But no investigation follows. The reports are filed. The castle is marked as cleared, and attention moves elsewhere, to more pressing matters of rebuilding a devastated nation. Houska is left empty, again. The immediate post-war years are chaotic. Property ownership is uncertain. The communist government, which takes power in 1948, nationalizes many estates, but Houska is eventually returned to the descendants of Josef Szymonek, as it technically remained his property throughout the occupation. The Szymonek family does not return to live there. The castle they knew, the renovated, electrified, comfortable summer retreat, is gone. What remains is a structure damaged by wartime occupation, marked by evidence of activities no one wants to discuss. The family considers selling. But who would buy Houska? It is too remote to be commercially viable, too damaged to serve as a residence without massive investment, and too laden with legends, now reinforced by Nazi occupation, to attract anyone seeking a simple country estate. So the family keeps it. They fund basic repairs, replacing broken windows, fixing the roof, ensuring structural stability. But they do not occupy it. They do not restore the modernizations Szymonek installed in the 1930s. The castle returns to the state it has occupied for most of its history, maintained but not inhabited, watched but not used. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Houska exists in a kind of limbo. It is neither ruin nor residence, neither tourist attraction nor abandoned structure. The chapel remains the focus of maintenance. The stone slabs are realigned, mortared back into perfect position. New masses are held, though infrequently. The door is kept locked. The evidence of Nazi occupation is quietly removed. The bullet holes in the walls are filled and plastered over. The scratch marks on the slabs are smoothed down. The burn marks on the floor are scrubbed until they fade. It is as if the family, and perhaps the authorities, want to erase the memory of what happened during those 5 years, as if acknowledging it would require explanations no one is prepared to give. In 1989, the communist regime falls. Czechoslovakia undergoes rapid political and economic transformation. Property restitution laws allow families to reclaim estates nationalized by the communist government. For Houska, this means a formal return to the Szymonek descendants, but it also means decisions must be made. The castle cannot simply continue as it has, maintained but unused, draining resources without generating any return. The family considers options. Demolition is proposed. Tear down the structure, reclaim the land, sell the property for development. But there is immediate opposition. Historians argue that Houska is a significant Gothic structure, one of the best preserved early castles in the region. Preservation groups advocate for its protection as a cultural monument, and locals, predictably, invoke the legends. You cannot tear down Houska. The pit must remain sealed. The castle is not just architecture, it is a responsibility. The arguments are effective. Demolition is abandoned. Instead, the family commits to restoration and public access. Between 1990 and 2005, major restoration work is undertaken. Structural engineers assess the foundations. Walls are reinforced. The roof is completely replaced. Interiors are cleared of debris and stabilized. But the restoration is not a full reconstruction. The family makes a deliberate choice. Houska will be preserved as a historical site, not transformed into a modern facility. No electricity is reinstalled. No plumbing is added. The castle will remain medieval, Gothic, deliberately austere. The only exception is the addition of basic lighting for tours, battery-powered lamps, removable fixtures that do not alter the structure itself. In 2005, Houska Castle opens to the public for the first time in its 735-year history. Guided tours are offered from spring through autumn. Visitors can walk the halls, see the Green Chamber, stand in the knight's drawing room, and, under strict supervision, enter the chapel. The tours are carefully managed. Group sizes are limited. Photography is allowed in most areas, but not in the chapel. Visitors are not permitted to touch the stone slabs. The tour route is designed to avoid certain sections of the castle that remain off-limits. The response is immediate and enthusiastic. Houska becomes a popular destination, drawing tourists from across Europe and beyond. The castle's legends, amplified by internet forums, paranormal television shows, and travel blogs, attract people seeking encounters with the mysterious. Guides are trained to tell the stories. The prisoner's descent, the Swedish commander, the Nazi occupation, the legends of the gateway to hell. The stories are presented with a careful balance, acknowledged as folklore, but not dismissed, leaving space for visitors to believe or skeptically enjoy. Revenue from tourism helps fund ongoing maintenance. The castle, for the first time, generates income that offsets its costs. The arrangement is sustainable, ensuring that Houska can be preserved indefinitely. But the chapel remains the boundary. It is included in tours, but with restrictions. Visitors stand near the entrance, looking in from the doorway. They are not allowed to walk across the stone slabs. They are not allowed to linger. The guides explain structural concerns, preservation of frescoes, respect for sacred space. But everyone understands the real reason. Some boundaries are not negotiable. The seal is the seal, and it must not be compromised, not even for tourism. In recent years, modern technology has been applied to Houska. Ground-penetrating radar has been used to map the structure's foundations. Acoustic analysis has been conducted in the chapel. Thermal imaging has documented temperature variations. The results are interesting but inconclusive. The pit beneath the chapel is confirmed. It does exist. It does descend beyond the reach of radar. It does exhibit unusual acoustic properties. But these findings do not resolve the fundamental questions. They do not explain why the castle was built. They do not explain the legends. They do not explain what, if anything, lies at the bottom. Science can describe. It cannot interpret. An interpretation is what Houska demands. So the castle continues to exist in two registers, the physical and the mythological, the documented and the imagined. Tourists walk its halls and experience both. They see the stone, the frescoes, the Gothic arches, but they also feel the cold, the heaviness, the sense that they are standing in a place where history and story are inseparable. If you could explore one room in this castle, which would it be? Comment, chapel, green chamber, foundation, or courtyard. Since Houska Castle opened to tourists in 2005, a new kind of documentation has emerged: visitor accounts. These are not historical records or official reports. They are personal testimonies, posted on travel websites, shared in online forums, uploaded as YouTube videos. They are subjective, anecdotal, impossible to verify. But they are also consistent. Visitors report feeling cold in the chapel, even on warm days. Thermal imaging confirms this. The chapel's average temperature is several degrees lower than surrounding rooms. Cameras malfunction, batteries drain unexpectedly, memory cards corrupt, phones shut off. These issues occur disproportionately in the chapel area, though they also occur elsewhere in the castle. Is this evidence of paranormal activity? Or is it evidence of electromagnetic interference from the castle's stone structure, metal reinforcements, or geological features beneath? The answer depends on who you ask. Audio recordings made in the chapel sometimes capture sounds that were not audible at the time of recording. Whispers, footsteps, something that resembles breathing. Professional audio engineers who have analyzed these recordings note that old stone buildings produce numerous acoustic effects, echoes, resonances, sounds created by air moving through cracks. They do not rule out natural explanations, but they also do not rule out the possibility that the recordings captured something. Visitors describe feeling watched. This is a common experience in the chapel, but it also occurs in the green chamber and along the second-floor corridor. The feeling is described as a prickling on the back of the neck, a sense that someone is standing just out of sight. Psychologists attribute this to hypervigilance, a heightened state of awareness triggered by the castle's atmosphere and the stories visitors have heard. The brain, expecting danger or strangeness, interprets ambiguous sensory inputs as threatening. But the feeling is real, even if the cause is psychological, and visitors experience it consistently. In 2004, before the castle officially opened to the public, a paranormal investigation team requested permission to spend 3 nights at Houska. The family, curious and perhaps hoping to generate publicity, agreed. The team, 4 investigators with experience in other allegedly haunted sites, brought standard equipment: electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, audio recorders, motion sensors. They set up in the chapel on the first night. For the first 4 hours, nothing unusual occurred. The equipment functioned normally. The chapel was cold, but measurably so. No inexplicable temperature variations. At 2:47 a.m., according to their log, one of the investigators reported seeing a figure. He described it as tall, dressed in dark robes, standing near the altar. The figure was visible for approximately 3 seconds before vanishing. None of the other investigators saw the figure. Infrared cameras did not capture it. Motion sensors did not trigger. The investigator who reported the sighting was experienced, credible by the standards of paranormal research. He had no history of fabricating evidence or seeking attention. He was visibly shaken by what he had seen, or believed he had seen. The team reviewed all footage and audio from that moment. Nothing definitive appeared, but one audio recorder positioned near the altar captured a sound, a low exhalation, as if someone had sighed deeply. The sound was analyzed. It did not match ambient noise patterns. It did not correspond to any of the investigators' breathing. It was anomalous. Whether it was paranormal is another question. On the 3rd night, the team experienced a temperature drop in the chapel. In the span of 90 seconds, the temperature fell from 12 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius, a drop of 15 degrees. This is extraordinary. Temperature changes of that magnitude, that quickly, do not occur in enclosed spaces without external cause. The chapel door was closed. No windows were open. No drafts were detected. The drop was measured by 3 independent thermometers, all of which recorded similar readings. Infrared cameras captured the change visually. The chapel air cooling rapidly, starting from the floor and rising. After 90 seconds, the temperature began to rise. Within 5 minutes, it returned to normal. The team had no explanation. Cold spots are commonly reported in paranormal investigations, but they are usually small, localized, and brief. A 15-degree drop affecting the entire chapel is unusual. Skeptical explanations have been proposed. Perhaps a geological vent beneath the chapel released cold air from underground caverns. Perhaps the castle's stone structure, combined with specific atmospheric conditions, created a temporary inversion. These explanations are plausible, but unproven. The event remains unexplained. The team's final report, published in a paranormal research journal, concluded, "We cannot confirm paranormal activity at Houska Castle. However, we documented several anomalous events that resist conventional explanation. Further investigation is warranted, but access limitations make comprehensive study difficult." The family did not authorize further investigations. The 2004 study remains the only formal paranormal research conducted at Houska, but informal investigations continue. Tourists with EMF detectors, ghost hunting apps, and recording devices conduct their own experiments. They upload results to YouTube, share findings in forums, debate interpretations. The castle has become a participatory mystery. Visitors are not just observers. They are active investigators, contributing to a growing body of experiential data that is unscientific but culturally significant. Because Houska is not just a historical site, it is a contemporary legend, one that is being written in real time by thousands of visitors who walk its halls, stand in the chapel, and wonder. Among all the visitor accounts, one legend persists above all others: the faceless monk. Multiple visitors across different years report seeing a figure in black robes walking the castle's corridors. The figure is described as tall, its movements slow and deliberate. But when witnesses try to see its face, there is nothing. No features, no expression, just a smooth, featureless expanse where a face should be. The sightings are always brief. The figure appears at